All right, so we're going to kick off the hardware kind of roundtable showcase. Yes, sir. Okay, so question, has anybody here used drones for prescribed fire? I have not. I was invited to do that on one project and then didn't get a chance to go out, but we can, I would suggest to that person, save that question for one of the specialty breakout groups later in the week that we can then we can have them join in and we can have those topical questions covered in more detail. It's great though. So the hardware, we have such a ton of domain experts that use all kinds of different equipment that we're going to each kind of just go from one component to the next, focusing on what your project goals might be, because you don't need a $60,000 Matrice 300 with all of the bells and whistles if you can do the same thing with a Mavic. For some things you don't want to have that big drone, especially maybe cinematography. You just don't need that overkill sort of platform. Similarly, Matrice 600. So we're like kind of focused on what kind of data do you need? What is your budget? It always largely comes down to that. How much time do you have and what options are out there? You'll see that Drone Camp tends to focus on off-the-shelf platforms because we want to reach the broadest audience possible, given the contemporary kind of options that are out there, rather than build it yourself stuff. That's why you see so much DJI stuff, drones all across the tables, and then the conventional MicaSense data collection, the camera setups, as well as the DJI partnered company products. Good. One thing you might consider too is, can someone else do this better than you? A lot of the times, one of the reasons we've had 48 projects that I've been involved with through A&R is that a lot of researchers don't have the time, the expertise, the money in a lot of cases to get a full complement of equipment. It's better to get someone else to do it. I'm guessing that a number of you are aspiring to be that person that they go to. So there's just knowing about what kind of equipment you might need for some given scenario is going to, it's going to make your expertise more valuable. Next. Good. Session overview. We're going to do some short talks. I mean, short, like we're going to talk for a couple minutes on each of the components, and we're going to make sure that we open up plenty of time for questions as well. Covering sensors, fixed wings, quadcopters, accessories, and peripheral. I realize that we're going to we have so much equipment here. Is the accessories and peripheral are going to be pushed into the afternoon session because it's a natural fit with mission planning and preparing for field campaigns. And then a little bit on VTOL. And then a little bit about GPS, high precision mapping, and those are in the LiDAR. Those are going to be separate sessions that are going to be later this week, so we won't dive into that so much. Next. Hardware selection. This is big, and it's one of probably the single biggest question that I get for people that are just diving into drone applications is, what should I get? And because I'm a remote sensing person, I look at it like, I don't really care too much what is holding my equipment, my camera, as long as it's reliable and easy to fly and get the data that I want. I want it to be reliable, and I want to get it up there and legal. And really what I want is whatever it's going to be hanging off of it. Whether it's an RGB camera to a hyperspectral sensor, that's kind of the way I look at it. That said, we have actually one of the sometimes instructors for Drone Camp, he's in Peru right now. We lent him one of our drones that was like a $300 drone at the time and a $3,500 camera hanging off of it. That's not an advisable thing to do, because that $300 drone just kept flying and we never saw it again. And so you got to kind of balance sometimes you have to balance it by necessity. If you're going to carry a LiDAR unit, you need a big drone like the Matrice 600. But that's an overkill if you're just carrying you just need a little teeny sensor on it. So next. So I'm going to kick this off with just think it's the first one we'll cover. I'm going to talk about the Phantom 4 Pro. They're still around. They stopped production a while back, but that was kind of one of the, before the Mavics became so popular, that's what you saw all the time. This is actually a Phantom 3 Pro. It looks just like the Phantom 4 Pro. It works almost the same. It's got 3 minutes difference. Flight time. The reason why we don't have a Phantom 4 Pro here is because it crashed into a tree a while back. It's a little user error. But I won't throw anyone under the bus. It just happens sometimes. And you live, you learn. If you fly long enough, you will crash your platform at some time or another, whether it's user error or battery failure or whatever. But great drone. That's the Phantom 4 is where it started collecting 4K. Great for videography if you need that. The really reliable mechanically, and then it was pretty short-lived because the Mavic came along, and the Mavic is fantastic for most small applications. The one value, and this is a consideration I'll throw out there though, for having something a little larger, and our Phantom 4 was black. I like black because it's a lot easier to see against a light blue sky. White looks a lot like clouds, especially slightly hazy. It's harder to see at a distance. By the way, I don't know if we'll share it, but Brandon has a calculation that can show for someone that's got 20/20 vision, how far out you can see a drone. So that's a kind of a little consideration. I mention that because that pertains to the smaller drones like this more so than something like this. Next.
I'm Pat Giampietro. I'm a staff member here at CSUMB. I'm the geospatial technology officer and the drone coordinator. So anybody who's visiting here who has questions or any problems to do with CSUMB, come find me and I'll help you out. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Phantom 4 RTK. This is based on the same chassis as the Phantom 4 Pro. It has the same 20 megapixel camera as the Phantom 4 Pro, but what this has that really no drone, no DJI quadcopter previous to it is that it's equipped with RTK GPS. And maybe some of you guys don't know what that is yet, but there will be a session on Thursday on high precision mapping where we'll talk about what RTK GPS is. What you really need to know is that it's a differentially corrected GPS that is very, very precise. You can get centimeter accuracy on your photos from a drone like this if you have RTK corrections coming in. It makes use of either a base station, this is the DRTK2 base station, also made by DJI, that can communicate with this in real time. You set this up on site on a known location. You set it up on a benchmark that you've already got a very good position on, and then it talks to the drone as the drone's flying and gives the drone corrections, which makes the drone's position very, very precise. It can also be used without this base station and get its corrections via a system called Ntrip, which is an internet provided source of corrections. So as long as you have an internet connection and there's a base station not more than 10 or 20 kilometers away from you that is broadcasting those corrections over the internet, then this drone can get its corrections via internet and not have to have a base station on site. The other thing that's a little different about this drone is that the remote that it comes with typically has an integrated display. It's a built-in Android device. It's kind of nice. It's got a nice bright screen, and it's kind of nice because you can't forget your tablet. It's always attached to the controller, and we all use checklists all the time. We'll talk about this afternoon. We all use checklists so that we don't forget gear that we need, but it happens. You get in the field and you're like, oh, where's and someone's driving back if it's even close enough to drive to. I think that's all I will say about, the cost. It costs much more than the P4 Pro, if you can still get it, is only a couple $1,000s. The RTK, P4 RTK is going to be about $6,000 just for the aircraft. And if you want it with the base station as well, you're going to pay another $4,000 or so for that. So it's about $10K for the whole package. But it can save you a lot of money because we're going to talk about precision and how you can increase the precision of your project using ground control points. But having RTK GPS in your aircraft can almost eliminate the need for ground control points. You can just do a couple of ground control points to check the accuracy rather than needing the ground control points to give you the accuracy. So it can actually, on a large project or in areas where you can't actually get to places to put out ground control points in your whole survey area, it can actually really pay for itself. No, but the batteries in the P4 RTK are the exact same batteries in the P4 Pro and P4, which Becca's going to talk about. The batteries in the base station do fit in the controller, but not in the aircraft.
So just to jump in, let you guys know, there's also a multispectral version of the P4. So this actually collects RGB and then all the multispectral data. It's an adapted MicaSense camera. So even though it's not marketed as a MicaSense multispectral, it is actually, DJI bought the plans from MicaSense and then integrated it in here. So you can use, if you happen to have the calibration panel from a MicaSense unit, you can use it with this and calibrate your data. It works exactly the same way as Pat said. Just the difference is that it's got a different camera on it. And it also uses an iPad as the tablet. It won't use anything else. No Android allowed, apparently. So it's great. It's the app's a little temperamental, but everything else is awesome and works really well. Excellent.
A real quick point about these DJI aircraft that we've talked about so far and are going to continue. They have payloads or sensors. The cameras on them are not interchangeable. They're not removable. When you buy the drone, it has a particular sensor on it, and it can't be taken off. Well, it can, but it's not supposed to be taken off. And you can't swap in a different one. So some of the other aircraft that we're going to talk about next have swappable payloads. You can change different cameras on them. So that'll be important.
So this is the Mavic 2 Pro DJI. This one has a Hasselblad RGB camera on it, which is fantastic for videography. It works really, really well. You can also install filters on the front. So there are people who have installed filters to get multispectral data on it. Those are all aftermarket. They do change the balance of the drone a little bit. There's also other cameras you can mount on it post aftermarket. I haven't done that myself, but I have seen people do that. It's really stable. It's really great. I absolutely adore this drone. Super fun to fly and very versatile. In terms of flying it, you can use a tablet. You can also use your phone. Either works well. If you get a tablet, you can get a bigger one and have like a little adapter that goes in the controller, because the controller is built to put your phone in. And you'll see this tomorrow when we go out and fly, because we'll be using those. That just gives you a bigger screen so you can actually see more as you're flying it, which can be really, really helpful. Two tips that I would say about this: if you are using your phone, do not back up your data on your phone from the app, because you will fill your phone up and use your data plan. There's a built-in SD card in here, and I would say just use that, and you can change that in the app settings. The other thing I would say is a lot of people catch this by hand because it is super easy to do that. I don't actually recommend it until you're more comfortable with the drone, because you can hit yourself with the propellers, which is gonna hurt briefly, but then you're fine. If you do happen to, for some reason, end up with this in your hand, there's a safety feature. If you turn it over, the propellers stop automatically. And so it's a really, really easy way to just turn everything off and not have a whirring thing next to your head, which is always a good plan. Anything else you guys want to add on the Mavic 2?
One of the things that I've seen people use that for is for marine applications. So one of the things I've seen people use the Mavics for, that's great for, is in marine applications where you want to launch off a boat and you can catch it. Maybe wear gloves. The main thing is your eyes. I have had the Mavic hit my fingers before, and it's It's not that big a deal. I mean, don't recommend it, but it's not like you're flying a Matrice 300 where you can lose a digit. So there's yeah, you'll need stitches on those ones. But for marine applications where you have to launch and land off a boat, great option there. Anything else? Let's see what's next. Oh, I'm next. The Inspire 1 and 2. I don't have a 2 here. The 2 is the new and improved version of the Matrice 1. What we're looking at here. This is largely a videography drone, or was one of the purposes for its design, being that the legs lift up and it lets a large view from the camera angle. With the when the legs are above, you don't end up having legs in your videos, which is a nice thing. They're fairly stable. They're very wind resistant because they're pendulumed, so the body's down low. It's not going to get knocked over by fairly high winds, and it's fair for both this and the 2 are really fast. They're a pretty good drone. It's got this has a short flight time. We're going to use this tomorrow because it's just fun to fly and it's pretty cool. You don't see these around very much anymore. They're definitely sunsetted some time ago, but it is kind of nice. Let's see other factors about this. Oh, one thing that this is great for is you can set it up with 2 controllers. One where one person can control the camera and one person can control the flight of the drone. Again, that's one of the purposes, having the legs come up so you can get the angles, the camera to pan around in different directions. There's a huge price jump from this, which was like, last time I saw it was like $1,200. And I don't even know if you can get them anymore, to the 2 that's like $6,000 that I still see people looking for, again, for videography purposes. Well, one thing that, and it's funny, when we brought this in, Shane was saying, man, this case is heavy. This is really heavy. And that's because we have 15 charged batteries for this in the case. So we have enough flight time with it tomorrow. But something that we'll maybe touch on a little bit later with the planning for field campaigns is that it's not just about the drones that you have to consider. It's all the other pieces like batteries, chargers, the cameras. This has just a simple little camera on it. There's an RGB camera that actually works pretty well. And but you can, again, have a cheap drone that jumps up a lot, $5,000-$10,000 if you just put the right camera on it. Next. So while I'm here we have a Matrice 100. This is my favorite erector set drone. It's an erector set because this given platform has come apart completely and been put back together at least 6 or 7 times that I can think of. One time because it crashed. One of our colleagues misjudged the angle of the slope and the direction and the trees and crashed it pretty good. And because it is an erector set, I just ordered new legs, a new motor for one of them, one of the arms, and put it back together. And it's been working fine since. Flown this given drone probably 4,000 or 5,000 acres at least, maybe significantly more than that over the years. It's set up with a red edge camera on it where you have an illumination sensor on the top. And then below, you see the camera on the bottom. The illumination sensor is to get calibration from the downwelling of light compared to the reflectance from the bottom, which helps correct in mid-flight when there's clouds that come through intermittently. Because a flight campaign on something like this can take, I think the longest it usually flies 28 minutes. We'll talk about this tomorrow, but when you have like a drone that's capable of flying, say 32 minutes, you're never going to fly it more than 28 minutes. Because if you're getting down that low, you're at the end of its battery and you're risking major problems. Some drones like this one have 2 batteries mounted on them. It's not only is it good for redundancy because if one battery fails, you'll see your battery power on your controller ticking down really fast, but at least you could get it close to the ground before it goes down hard. This thing's battery fails, which we just actually looked at a photo from one of our research centers, not a research center, one of the natural reserves. And one of the batteries entirely exploded on the drone, on a Mavic, I believe, just Friday. It was pretty awesome. Luckily, it was already on the ground. I've heard of batteries exploding in the air, coming down and starting fires. That's actually the #1 reason that hobby air parks get closed down, is fire risk, is because there's well, not just exploding in the air, that'll happen too, but they crash and then explode. So you got to consider that for fire danger. What's that? Was that an airbag? Airbag? No. So the question was, if it was that, was there an airbag? But yes, sir. Yes, definitely. Yep, coming up soon. So yes, there are options. Good point. DJI has just dominated the consumer market so much. Their customer service that has a lot to be asked for, but for the quality, the reliability, and for the price point, it's just so hard to get anything else that's better. Brendan? Yes, yes.
Okay, so this one does come up quite a bit on, can you use DJI equipment because it's somehow restricted? It's yes and no. If you are a federal agency, you may be prohibited from buying DJI equipment. And if you're operating on military installations, you may be prohibited from using DJI equipment on those properties. Now, DJI is on a federal watch list, but it is not on a you cannot use it list. It is DJI is prohibited from buying US IPs and technology, certain IPs and technologies, and exporting it from the US back to China. So that's what they mean when they say DJI is on a watch list. So you can still use it. Many agencies may have their own local policies, and that is what you would need to check with to see whether or not it's allowed within your group or on your property.
That's a great point, and I've had projects that was a sticking point. There are ways around it, particularly if you're collecting your data with, say, a Red Edge camera. That's not integrated with the system. It's separately collected data. It's also not having your data synced to your phone, which then technically at least the metadata could be accessed through internet doors. But if you don't have it synced and you're diligent about your control of where the data moves from, then you can kind of avoid the chance of, say, like a foreign country seeing where your data is. A lot of the time it's not really that sensitive, so it's not really an issue. So the question is, I'll hand it to Brandon because he is the one that he is the person that people report to on this stuff.
We will talk about all that tomorrow. We have an entire session about safety, and I'll show you pictures of that battery, and we'll talk about fire safety and all this other fun stuff.
So again, the question was like, referring back, the question was, can we get more information about how the batteries exploded? So then again, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Next. Oh, Matrice 200.
Cool. So this is talking about the Matrice 210. This beauty right here. So this is my personal workhorse. I use this all the time, along with a 300. This has a dual camera setup, so it's currently flying with a 45 megapixel RGB camera, and then the Microsense Ultim multispectral camera on the side. And I can't say enough good things about it. We did have a 200 originally, and there was a prop failure when we were down in Big Sur, and I watched it fall from the sky into a redwood forest. That didn't go well. We did manage to locate the mangled remains of it at the bottom of the redwood tree and get it replaced, and that was great. The company and the insurance was really great about it. It was completely not our fault. It was the rotor actually failed, and strangely, they can't fly with 3 props. What else to say? It has 2 batteries. It has probably they're mounted on the back. Has a 25, 28-minute flight time. And then the 2 weird things you see on the top that look like little tiny gray top hats, those are the GPS antenna. It's also RTK. So you'll have one of these that is paired with your drone, and it gives you that 2-centimeter accuracy for the images. I don't know. It's awesome. I like it. Oh, right. Yeah. So for the multispectral data, there's downwelling light sensors on the top. I don't think DJI has pushed this update yet, but it's coming, and it is the case on the 300, that the RTK information is actually relayed to the multispectral data now for the 300, and it will be for the 210 soon. At the moment, until that update comes through, the RTK stamp is only on the RGB data. So when you process the multispectral, it has sort of 10-centimeter accuracy, I think, just from the GPS unit that's in the downwelling light sensor. To fix that, throw it into GIS and use their automatic georeferencing, and it'll just slide over to the RGB and look really great. But like I said, there's an update coming according to my MicaSense folk, and that will get fixed shortly, which is great.
Couple more points about this and the Matrice 100 and some of the other DJI drones we're going to talk about. DJI has sort of 2 product lines. They have a kind of a consumer or a prosumer line, which is the Phantoms and the Mavics and the kinds of drones that you can buy at like Best Buy. They have integrated sensors that you can't change, and they're usually much less expensive. And then they have an enterprise level of drone, which are these Matrice ones, the bigger ones that have swappable payloads and where you can change the different sensors on them. They have a whole different system of support for them. You have to buy them from licensed vendors as opposed to just going down to your local electronics store. So they're kind of 2 different levels, and the costs are much different. The prosumer drones are like a couple $1,000s or maybe a couple $100 for like the minis and stuff. These drones are in the many thousands of dollars, up to, you can spend on a M300, you might spend $20,000 on the drone, plus that's without a camera. So you're going to buy a $10,000 camera also to put on it. So there's exactly.
We bought a 300 last year, and so the whole setup of that with I think we have 4 flights worth of batteries, so that's 4 hours, because the M300 can fly for about 55 to 60 minutes. So 4 hours of flight time, the RTK package, the 2 cameras, so the multi-spec Ultram and the RGB camera, the P1, the whole setup was $45,000. So it is significantly more. I will say the enterprise support from DJI is great, because you're going through your vendor, and then they talk to the DJI customer service people on your behalf, and then you can bug the customer service people as well. So between the 2 of you, you tend to get really good service, and the turnaround time is really great if you need repairs.
The angled props. I'm not an avionics or an engineer. I don't know much about the prop design. I know they all have somewhat different designs, and they do definitely make different amounts of noise. But I can't speak. I don't know if anybody else can speak to the actual design, engineering wise, of these drones and why they have props arranged the way they do. Anybody? Sure. That's kind of a given. You want to lift things off the ground, but I can't tell you why they should be pitched one way or the other. One last thing about the fact that this drone has 2 batteries. A lot of these drones have multiple batteries. One quirk about this 200 series is that if the 2 batteries, and the batteries cost like $400, $500 each. if your two batteries that you put on are not charged to within 10% of each other, if they're not about at the same level, the drone will not take off. And we had a situation where we were on our last flight of the day. We had done most of the area we were mapping. We had two batteries left. They weren't quite equal. And there's no way to say, well, just equalize them. Or the only thing we could do was take one battery out, the one that was had more in it, left it in, and spun the camera around for about 15 minutes just to wear down the battery to the point where we could put the other one back in and they would be close to each other. And we flew the flight. So you get inventive when you're in the field sometimes.
The other thing I would say to that is you can also have those battery packs that you take camping that can charge your computer 15 times or whatever. I always have one of those in the field with me so that although these batteries charge incredibly slowly, if you had something like that, you could top up the one that was a little lower. There was a question? So there was an answer on the prop angle question. Basically, the design of it, to paraphrase, increases the stability at the cost of some of the efficiency. And the 300, the props are actually the other way up, so it looks really weird. The props are mounted underneath. Sorry to not have the 300 here. It's actually, as I say, in the spa, getting some maintenance done. It will be back soon. All right, so this is what the 300 looks like. Sadly, it's not here. I love the 300. Like, it is so stable and it flies the two cameras totally fine. You can fly it in higher wind as well, which is helpful if you're trying to get some surveys. Obviously, the wind will affect the data quality a little bit, but it doesn't give you errors of high wind nearly as often as the other models do. You have a longer flight time, which is great. And yeah, it just kind of looks really cool. Like I said, it is on the more expensive end of quadcopters, but I think it's completely worth it if you can write a grant or get someone to buy it for you.
Comments on this one? Yeah, this is probably my favorite drone now. It used to be the EB, now it's the Matrice 300. It's incredibly stable. It's amazingly quiet too, given how large it is. I assume it's because of the way the props are designed, pointing down. It can carry quite a bit of weight. If the one thing that I should mention is that everything's kind of a trade-off when it comes to drones. Becca mentions that you can fly it up to like 55 minutes. Yes, but if you put two cameras on it, that cuts it down to 35 minutes maybe. Is like what I say 40. Yeah, it depends also at what altitude you are and what temperature. So there's some other factors that are considered in that, but it is fantastic. There's one thing additional to just the equipment that I might mention is the apps that you can use for flying them. So you, particularly if you're in consideration of autonomous flights, DJI Pilot is kind of one of the ones that you use, especially on the Matrice 210 or 200. The Matrice 300, you have the option of using SiteScan, is an application from Esri, the ArcGIS parent company. And I'm not entirely sold on their SiteScan as like a two-part application. One, it's a flight controlling app. The second part is a data processing component to it. The data processing side, I'm not quite sold on entirely. I wish there's a lot more control, but the actual flight control app is awesome. It is really neat where you can download elevation model, you plan all your mission beforehand, you can do adjustments in the field, you can do everything that you can do on the other conventional apps and more. And it seems to be extremely reliable, but you have to use an iPad for it, which iPads overheat really easy. So that's a kind of some other trade-offs. But when you have a drone like this that you can combine with these really neat flight control or autonomous flight or autopilot apps, that's, yeah, very, very nice. One thing that I might mention in reference to Pat mentioned about the RTK of the accuracy, when you go out to a new site, if you don't have like a fixed point to get your like the known position of your RTK, like, which I just did a project like this, went out and I was like, this is out in a wetland. I have no idea. I have no reference points. I need those ones. You definitely have to go through the workflow of getting the data from online, which in that workflow is not, I don't know, maybe you have an easier way about it than I found, but it's not an easy, intuitive process.
There's a couple ways to deal with that. You can do a static survey for a period of time over an unknown point, get those data, then post-process them using data from the internet and get an exact position for where you had your base station. And as long as you've marked it well, or you've left the base station there, then you plug that position that you've calculated into the software, and then it'll work from there. I wanted to say a quick thing about the a very different aspect of the M300, which has been mentioned, but is worth mentioning again, is that the props are on the underside of the arms. They're not on the top. So especially if you're going to hand catch this guy, you've got the 4 Cuisinarts pointing down at your hands instead of up where on the other side of the arms where they're safe. And I can speak to why they did this for this drone. If you look on the back 2 arms, those little cone-shaped antennas, just like on the M210 RTK here, those are the RTK antennas, and you want to have them up higher. That's why these are on little arms. You want to have them up higher than the props so the props don't interfere with them. So that's why they put the props on the bottom. And there may be aerodynamic or other efficiency reasons why they did that too. But if you're going to hand catch a drone like this, which we don't recommend any beginners do, but if you're in a situation where you do have to hand catch, like you're on a boat or for some other reason, you definitely want gloves, a hard hat, and eye protection. You do not want to risk your health just to, let the drone fall on the ground instead of hurting yourself with this thing.
I don't know. Catching a Matrice 300 would be scarier than catching a Matrice 600 to me. They are heavy. It's a big drone. I thought the 210 was kind of a step up in size. The Matrice 300 is really a step up. The batteries feel like golf cart batteries. They're quite large. So unfortunately we don't have them. Becca's is in the shop. Mine is being shipped to Costa Rica right now. So we're just couldn't bring them this week. Yes, sir. So the question is, looking at the camera on top, is that for inspections under bridges and so forth? Yes, that's what the purpose of that is. And Becca mentioned this is extremely stable drone and it performs well in high winds. It's not an issue.
So the answer is yes, it will do surveys under bridges. And one of the sales points for the 300 is construction and building inspections, towers, that kind of thing. What I will say though is depending on what kind of data you need, and we'll talk about this drone a little bit later, I'm going to plug the Skydio drone for bridge and building inspections because this doesn't require GPS to fly. It creates a real-time 3D point cloud around the drone, and it's very hard to crash into things. And so this is actually much safer to use on bridge inspections.
Hey everybody, my name is Michael Hang. I'm a research scientist for NASA, but I work here at CCMV. And this is Toothless, Matrice 600 Pro. It's one of DJI's largest drones, capable of carrying up to 13 pounds. So it's the heavy lifter of the fleet. This is also why it has 6 rotors. It gives it more balance and stability, as well as a lot of redundancy. So if you happen to lose a rotor or two, it can still fly. Trust me, I know. It was also designed to be very flexible with many customization options, giving the user independence to choose whatever system works for their needs. So it's compatible with most of DJI's gimbals and cameras. And the large payload allows you to have custom mounts or sensors like LiDAR or multispectral cameras. So right now it's mounted with an Alta, like Sean said, overkill, big drone, small camera. But we bought it because for future projects, we want to have the option to put some heavier stuff on it. The downsides for this drone is that it's huge. And I had to literally rent a car to bring this here today. It doesn't fit in my car. So it's definitely not portable. And there's also a fair amount of setup time before you can actually fly it. The landing gear here needs to get attached and the rotors need to be raised and locked in, all that. And I think as of last year, they don't make this anymore, right? Yeah. Yeah, you can still find them for a while.
One of the selling points for the 600 for a long time was that it was the only one in the fleet that would fly LiDAR sensors. That's no longer true. So the 300 will actually fly a LiDAR unit as well. So that's an option.
You have anything to say?
It's a great drone, but when you go up, one of kind of a anti-selling point, I might say, it's in, well, depends. Matrice 300, you might spend $800 per battery, but you have to have 6 batteries. And speaking of weight, when you're going out in the field, that's per flight. It's not like you're changing 2 batteries, you're changing 6 batteries. And so and charging all of those, there's a lot of logistical challenges when it comes to that. Yeah, it's not a ton of flight time, but it can carry a lot. It is very reliable. It's a fun drone. It operates just like the rest of them almost. Let's see what's next. Probably we got to step it up because we're almost to the end.
I'll just be really quick talking about DJI's newest enterprise level drone is the Matrice 30. It's kind of like a Mavic form factor in that it has the folding arms. It's a little bigger than a Mavic, but it's kind of like one of these other Matrices. They're marketing it really towards the inspection, construction, first responders, law enforcement, things like that. And the reason we know that is because while it has a very good camera and a laser rangefinder and can come with a thermal camera and has RTK, which you can see those 2 antennas. And again, so the back props are facing down, the front props are facing up. It has RTK GPS, but it isn't good for high precision mapping because it does not have time sync, which is DJI's name for how they marry the RTK position of the aircraft together with the way the gimbal is oriented and a very precise timestamp to give you very precise position of your photograph. So the RTK knows where the drone is very, very precisely, but the pictures aren't as precisely geolocated. And so it doesn't really help you make better maps having the RTK. All you know is where the drone was. So that's really the downside to it. It's about 10K for the non-thermally equipped and about 14 for the one with the thermal camera. So it has its uses, but it's not a mapping drone.
We have a question in the back, but let's do this. Because we have so much, and we have while we have talk about it over lunch, you can catch us and we can talk about some of the equipment. We'll also be going over this more this afternoon in the days to follow as well. So we'll jump to the let's.
All I want to say here is that DJI has a very, very rapid product cycle lifespan. They retire drones. It's literally like a couple years after they introduce them. So you're spending $10,000 or $20,000 on something, and it will continue to be supported, but they won't be making them anymore in just a couple of years after you buy them. So this is just from DJI Forum, just a summary of product lifespan.
Okay, so that's an EBX. And I'm going to let Justin mention something about this. So was my favorite drone, largely because the flight planning app, eMotion, is really nice, and you can cover quite a large area. Once, and granted, there's a trick to getting it in the air sometimes, but once it's actually doing its thing, in my experience, it's been phenomenally reliable. It's just every landing can be a crash landing or is a crash landing. So you always have that, especially when you have several $1,000s in cameras on them. We'll talk about cameras a little bit later too, but this has got a Parrot Sequoia. It's a 4-band multispectral, unlike the 5-band multispectrals that were over there. We'll kind of get into those at a later time. And did you comment about fixed wing?
Yeah, and I'll just briefly mention, so a lot of what we've talked about thus far has been the quadcopters. And one of the benefits of flying those is that you actually have more control over the drone. So if you have an autonomous flight and all of a sudden, there's a plane that's around or there's a reason why you need to take over the controls to fly the drone manually, with the quadcopters, that's possible. With the fixed wings, although you can fly them over longer distances, you have less control of the drone once it's in the air. So you might be able to toggle it to drop in terms of elevation if there's a hazard in the way. But since you only have one propeller, there's no way to get it to kind of hover if necessary. And so it's just another factor to take into account when you're thinking about the different platforms. The other thing too is because the EB is, in order to land it, it actually has to crash. You have to be mindful about what's in the area and mindful of the pitch and angle, because oftentimes you'll lose wings, you'll lose a piece of the nose, and sometimes because of the crash and the impact, it might have knocked around some of the sensors internally, and so won't want to take off again. So just different things to think about in terms of whether you need a quadcopter or whether you need a fixed wing and the trade-offs between the two platforms.
So he says the reason why SenseFly gives you a tube of glue with the platform. Yes, that is very, very true. But it's a great platform and it's nice. But you have to, it's not like you can just take off and land in one spot. You have to plan out what the wind angle is. And if you have a large enough landing zone, like a runway, essentially, it preferably grass or something soft, so you don't destroy your equipment. Next. This one of the last two.
Which is why VTOL aircraft, that's vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, are kind of the best of both worlds between the quadcopter and the fixed wing. It's a fixed wing aircraft that can take advantage of lift and fly for longer distances and spend more time in the air, but it can take off and land straight up and down. This is a Firefly 6 Pro from Bird's Eye View. The props in the front actually rotate. And so when it takes off straight up. Then when you need to do forward flight, those props rotate forward and it flies like an airplane. So it can stay in the air much longer. It can actually hover. It doesn't, it's kind of one of those jack of all trades, master of none things. It doesn't really do helicopter well, but it can kind of get by, and you can control it with a joystick controller. Unlike the EB, comes with a controller in the box, but it's in a hidden compartment in the case that a lot of people don't even know it's there. And SenseFly originally, at least, said, I don't know if they're still saying this, they said if you use the controller, you voided your warranty. So they don't. Okay. That's how long ago I bought my EB. So this guy can stay in the air about 40 or 50 minutes. Has 2 batteries. The company itself, Bird's Eye View, is out of business. They just quietly shut their doors without telling anybody. They still had a website up. You could still try to order stuff, and then they'd email you and say, oh, sorry, we're closed. There's a user group, a Yahoo user group of users that are still trying to keep their aircraft working and sharing ideas and, you know, where do you get aftermarket batteries and things like that. So anyway, VTOL, there's a number of other VTOL manufacturers and models that are still in business. Quantum Systems makes the Trinity. That's a great aircraft. If I had to buy one now, I would buy that. Not, well, I can't buy this. Actually, you can get them on eBay for pretty cheap. So if you're interested in an obsolete system, you can get a couple $1,000s. That's it.
See, one comment from the chat is about the Matrice, or no, not the Mavic 3 Pro. That I just flew that recently a couple of times. Excellent, really nice camera. I mean, the camera is even better than the 2's Hasselblad camera. It's amazingly good. But and then you also have the option to have you can have thermal on that. That's good. I've used that for thermal monitoring on a different project. But yes, and let's see, is there. We'll skip this for now. And we'll skip the cameras, but we'll end the presentation with the Skydio and the and what you were going to talk about. Yeah. Break for lunch.
All right. Yeah. So the Skydio 2 Plus is a great package for just about $2,100. It's a cinema drone, but it does drone mapping, which is great. It's got a 4K 60 frame per second camera. It's got 3 batteries in this package, 25-minute flight times. This thing is super fast. And the great thing is that it does drone mapping. So you can use drone deploy and survey a land, render a 3D image, which is what we're looking for here. So for $2,100, the Skydio is a great drone.
So the other thing I would say about the Skydio is that the company's philosophy is that they're selling a basic drone platform, but really their business model is around the software that runs the drone. So the 3D point cloud there's I think 20 cameras around the drone on the top, on the sides, underneath, creates this point cloud around the drone as it's flying, and that stops it from running into things. So if you want to spend $2,100, it can get this close to that object. If you want to up your investment and spend more money, it can get this close to an object without hitting it. So depending on what you need it for, you can adjust the price point. Is there something you want to say? Yeah. Yes, it can look up. Yeah.
And the one thing that came up earlier was, DJI is a Chinese-based company. This company is based in Redwood City. So any of those issues around, needing drones that were built in the United States, Skydio is one of those companies that gets past those restrictions.
I'd also add that Skydio has been around for 15 years. So there are often startup drone companies that are like, we're American made, manufactured, we can work on federal properties and contracts, but they're here and gone, right? Skydio has been around for a while, so they're tried and true. And they actually have the enterprise version of this has a contract with the military. That's why it was developed. And so they have DoD backing as well, which is really helpful.
All right, we went a little bit long there. I know there's a question in the back. If you'd like to grab me afterwards, that would be great. We can also revisit questions. If you have questions and we don't get to them, write them down. It's lunchtime now. So Julia's waving me upward. So we're going to take a break it's actually a 2-hour break, technically, because we'll have an hour of lunch, maybe an hour extra time. There's a beautiful space behind here to walk around if you want. We're going to do tech support for anyone that hasn't set up their software. You should have received an email last week if you're on the virtual people, but also applying to you as well. If you want to set your own computers up, this particularly might pertain to the folks that are doing the AVES teaching curriculum development. You might want to set up your own systems so you can bring it home with you more easily. But we have office hours from 1 till 2 that will be on to help any kind of issues that come up.
One last thing too, for the slides that we didn't have time for, you're going to get this PowerPoint. So there were some questions about sensors and about the DOJ issues and other stuff. There's slides about that in the slide deck and you'll all have access to that. And you can feel free to ask questions of us throughout the camp and afterwards by email.